On today's edition of the show, we discuss the Florida Panthers losing game one of the Stanley Cup Final by a final score of 5-2. We discuss Vegas taking advantage of 5-on-5, the Panthers' lack of flow on the power play, and we discuss the panic meter and the game two adjustments going in to game two.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Sunday, June 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Instagram as well at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and make the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast not only your first listen of the day, but getting your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, the Florida Panthers having 9 days off, and now without Etelus Theranen in game one, which we thought he was going to play after Paul Maurice talking about how he was fine and everything. You still can't figure out what Paul Maurice says even after 90 plus games of listening to his press conferences. But the Florida Panthers, they looked great early. The ice was tilted in their direction the most part for the first period, and even the tail end of the second period where they get it tied going into the third period. But Vegas breaks it open, wins this by a final score of 5-2, and the Florida Panthers drop game one of this best of 7 series against the Vegas Golden Knights. But we do have a special guest here on the show to discuss this loss for the Florida Panthers against the Vegas Golden Knights. He is the former host of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Josh Leucht. Josh, welcome back to the show.
Hey, excited to be back, even with a loss to talk about. It's still a Stanley Cup Finals loss to talk about, and so we'll break it down for you. And excited to be here.
Yeah, it's crazy, the anticipation just going into this with the long layoff, and then all the worry about the Panthers and if they would come out flat and everything. But honestly, after the first 3 minutes with the Vegas Golden Knights, they're getting their fair share of odd man rushes as well. I mean, Bob especially. I mean, he bails out Aaron Ekblad after having a no stick, and then kicking it out to Mark Stone, and then getting out to Brett Howden, and then Bob makes a stop there. Really, ever since that, I mean, the Florida Panthers go like 14 minutes of tilting the ice in their direction. I mean, you saw how breakups were happening in their own zone as well, especially Gus Forsling. I thought Gus Forsling really had a great start to this game as well, and especially with Ryan Lomberg as well, breaking up passes and then going back to the slot area and getting an opportunity on Adin Hill. But also Adin Hill in this game, especially in the first 2 periods, the Florida Panthers were starting to get him out of his own net, and I thought the Florida Panthers were doing well of getting him out of his net, and even on some of the rushes that they had throughout the game. I mean, I thought that they gave themselves an opportunity to make Adin Hill uncomfortable at times.
Well, let's not, kid ourselves. I mean, I know the score is 5-2, but the reality is this was a very close game. Mm-hmm. And I think that the Panthers at times looked great. I thought Bob looked great a lot. I think two of the goals for sure he didn't get a look at because of breakdowns in front of his own net. And one of them, every defenseman that plays for the Florida Panthers decided not to be on that part of the ice. So it's, I don't think that we can really blame Bob. I think he's going to get a lot of blame here in the next couple of days as everybody, spins the cycle of all the things they're supposed to say about game one. But the reality is it was a very tight, very close, good game for the Panthers. And another thing to remember too is that the Las Vegas Golden Knights are 0-1 in Stanley Cup Finals, where they won the first game. So they won the first game against Washington and then lost in 5. So really, I mean, it's one game. It's one that you wish you had. You like to win the first game. But if the Panthers come back on Monday night and win that game, we're not going to be talking about this anymore, because I think that was a very, 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 very tight game between both teams. And what ended up being the clincher at the end is special teams. And we can talk about that. I'm sure we're going to break it down. But special teams became the big factor in this game on both sides. We even had a shorthanded goal. So special teams, the penalty kill for the Panthers contributed. But unfortunately, the power play for the Panthers continues to struggle alongside some questionable at best officiating. So you want to just jump right into it, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, Nick Cousins gets cross-checked near the half wall by Chandler Stevenson and Haig as well, and you hear him mouthing, "Are you effing blind?" To the official as well, and yeah, that was one that really sticks out. But also some of the untimely penalties for the Panthers as well themselves. Eric Stahl getting a cross-check. Giving a cross check to Ivan Barbashev in the slot where he was way away from the play as well. And Josh Mahura didn't have the best game neither. I mean, there was one where Gudis got it out of his own, failed to clear it out of his own zone, and then Josh Mahura takes the bait on a penalty. I mean, and we remember there was a goal disallowed by Carolina in the previous round due to a Gudis clear, but replay showed that the puck was just offside. So we are very familiar with sometimes those happening with the Florida Panthers as well. So that is one that you wish that the Panthers can clean up a bit here. But yeah, the special teams part equaled out as far as Panthers getting their shorthanded goal. Eric Stahl in his 100th career postseason game. Good for Eric Stahl. And on that same penalty kill, the Florida Panthers didn't allow a shot on goal there as well. But also that the one power play goal that the Vegas Golden Knights had, the first one by Jonathan Marchessault. Radko Gudas gets out of the game early on, and then Brandon Montour takes his place. You wish that Montour could have had Mark Stahl take it towards the end boards, and instead of Brandon Montour staying back there, and that's what caused Jonathan Marchessault to be so open, where he beat Bobrovsky short side there. But it again, that's where really it comes down to for the Panthers in the special teams front.
Well, yeah, and you talked about that Radko Gudis, leading to the Mahura penalty. Remember, Gudis got hurt in the first period as well, and that was, I think, maybe his second shift after he came back from that. And I just felt like maybe he couldn't get his body to do what he wanted it to do, and it ended up leading, unfortunately, to that penalty kill, because he was in discomfort as he was trying to turn. But hopefully he can heal up on that over the next couple of days. Yeah, I mean, it came down to special teams, and obviously Vegas had more chances to exhibit their special teams, and their special teams were able to get it done. The Panthers, power play has continued to struggle. I think the biggest issue, not just on the power play, though that's part of it for sure, but a little bit on the 5-5 in the offensive zone tonight. I just really felt like the Panthers abandoned the game plan that they so clearly executed in the last two series to go north-south. When you have the puck, go to the net. When you have the puck, go to the net. And we saw a little bit of those east-west passing, long passes, trying to be pretty, admiring the pass, type of hockey that really got the Panthers in trouble last season in their series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it's kind of a frustrating thing to see that, and to see the Panthers reverting back to that kind of cross ice play. And so I think the main question is going to be here, is Paul Maurice able to rally the team with some coaching here and say, we got to get back to playing the basics. we can't assume that we can outskill these guys. We're going to have to outwork them, because the reality is I don't think the Panthers outworked Vegas tonight. And that's going to be what this comes down to. I also don't think they played bad. I think it's a real balanced game, but they've got to bring that competitive edge, and it just felt like they didn't really wake up tonight to do that.
Yeah, and definitely it's gonna it might happen whenever whenever you have that much time off. But hey, the Florida Panthers, they tilt the ice tilted in their direction the first period and even towards the end of the second period for them. So it's just a matter of also filling out the opponent as well for the Florida Panthers. But in segment number 2, we're going to discuss the keys to the Vegas Golden Knights getting this win and what the Florida Panthers are going to need to do in order to flip the script in game 2 of this best of 7 series against the Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your rides to My Garage and look for the green check mark to make sure your part will fit or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And now with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win. And when with the right parts are guaranteed, get the right parts, right fit, right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Segment number 2 here on this Sunday, June 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a post-game edition of the show where the Florida Panthers lose to the Vegas Golden Knights by final score of 5-2 in Vegas. One thing, Josh, that the Florida Panthers were struggling with, and really at the early part of the game, is faceoffs, especially towards the first maybe 25 minutes of the game, where really, especially on the power play, where they were struggling with getting in the zone. There was one power play where the Vegas Golden Knights cleared it 4 or 5 times in one, where they were even struggling to enter the zone when the puck was lifted in deep. The Vegas Golden Knights were there to also clear, get to the puck real quickly and retrieve it as well. And also, you spoke about north-south movement for the Panthers, but I also want to take the east-west direction, where especially on the Shea Theodore goal, where he's just it feels like Shea Theodore was kind of playing with his food a little bit there, especially on Anthony Duclair, where he just had him just all types of confusion. And then with that shot, I believe it was Howden who had the screen, but also Mahura screened Sergei Bobrovsky as well and took away the eyes of Bob. It was on the 2-1 goal in the middle of the second period as well. So that is also a part of the game where I thought the Florida Panthers lacked, especially when the Vegas Golden Knights at times were cycling the puck. But the thing is, the Florida Panthers shot attempted the Vegas Golden Knights at 5-on-5 and even shots on goal as well. But it was just about them being opportunistic on their chances. And we saw later on in the game how the Florida Panthers they had a stretch where they won 18 of their last 22 faceoffs, and look what happened. It resulted in a set play where Anthony Duclair just gets the puck right off a Barkov win, and then redirects off White Cloud to make it 2-2 at the time. But so those are the little bit of adjustments that the Florida Panthers made in between the game. But also, whenever you're losing those key faceoffs, especially on the power play where you can't get anything going, I mean, it's just a big buzzkill for this team at times.
Well, remember, they won, or at least they tied 2 periods, and then that third period was kind of a bust. But, this is a whole different game. If Nick Cousins gets the rebound on that crazy paddle save and actually buries it instead of fanning on it, it's a whole different story.
No doubt.
it's a game of inches, centimeters. It's not like it was a Vegas blowout. So I think Panther fans and the NHL as the whole need to settle down. In fact, I would say if you're somebody who likes to place wagers on the sports, this would be the time to place a wager on the Florida Panthers coming back in this series. I just think it was such a close game. One or two calls go differently, and it could be completely different. As far as what you're talking about, with the north-south hockey and the entries, particularly into the offensive zone, one of the things that Paul Maurice has kind of patented, I suppose, with this version of the Florida Panthers is the pucks in deep offensive scheme. So you're trying to get the puck chipped in deep behind the goal line, and you come in to retrieve it. Vegas has a better defense than some other teams, bigger for sure.
No doubt.
I don't know that would necessarily say that they're better than Carolina's defense, but they're definitely bigger. So you may struggle a little bit with that, but the Panthers also had a lot of opportunities where multiple guys were coming in, and they just made one too many passes, trying to get into the zone. They, instead of taking it and just going, like Vegas was leaving off, like they were letting them enter, and instead of taking the entry, they would try to drop pass and it would squirt out from the blue line. They just need to do better with that. If you have the puck here at the blue line, go in. You don't have to try to make the fancy play at the blue line to set up some sort of chance. You have to have the puck near the net to score. So I think that's going to be the kind of thing that Paul Maurice is going to make adjustments with. I imagine tomorrow in practice, there's going to be a lot of talk about zone entries. There's going to be a lot of talk about puck battles. There's going to be a lot of talk about north-south hockey and getting to the net. The one thing I would say that the Panthers did not do a good job of tonight was crashing the net. They did not do a good enough job of creating stuff around the goaltender. I know there was some contact and some movement and some, phantom and otherwise punches around the net. But as far as when the puck was in play and the puck was coming on net, there was a lot of perimeter shooting. And some of it was close. I mean, Brandon Montour, again, that's a game of 2 centimeters to the right. And that Brandon Montour goal goes in, and we're not even talking about a loss tonight. So, it's close. But these perimeter shots aren't going to cut it in the Stanley Cup Final. You've got to get in there. You got to cut hard. And the stars got to show up. Barkov, Tkachuk, these guys need to be part of what's happening. Can't be part of it if you get ejected. So I understand that Tkachuk's setting a tone for the next game. But all of this needs to be figured out. And I think it can be figured out, but they're going to need to go back to the whiteboard and make sure that they've got a game plan. So much of this is feeling things out too. I mean, Don't forget, in the last week or two of the season, the Panthers played Carolina and Toronto. So like they had some homework, I guess you could say, playing a couple of games, right? Again, in the last few weeks against Toronto and a game against Carolina. So they already had some of that figured out. It's been a while since they played the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that was a February game. March, okay. It's been a while since they've played Vegas. They only play Vegas once in a while because it's a West Coast team. And they've only, played a couple times in Las Vegas. So because of the lockout, the COVID and all that. So, it's one of those things where I think they're going to have to feel out this team a little bit, see what they're made of. But I trust, and this is a hard thing for me to say. Wow. Especially based on what I said in the regular season. But I trust Paul Maurice to make some adjustments here. I think he's a better coach than Cassidy. And I think that they're going to see a different strategy on Monday night.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about Tkachuk and towards the end of the game, I know you're trying to make Vegas go to the box and get something, especially because they lost that challenge on the Mark Stone goal as well. And also, Mark Stone had a great opportunity early in the game on a rush, and Bob just took away the angle for Mark Stone there as well. So what also, it was a quick review, by the way. Let's not forget to mention that for that fourth goal by the Vegas Golden Knights. What do you think about the high stick that Paul Maurice challenged for? Was it a damned if you did, damned if you didn't situation? Because I saw the way Mark Stone was positioned. that he wasn't necessarily up all the way straight. So it might, if he was like at his normal height, standing completely, his posture completely up, maybe where his stick actually would have been like at his head, even at his shoulder or below. So what do you think of that call for the high stick that Paul Maurice challenged?
I thought that stick was just as high as the War Room in Toronto, not calling that goal back. Unbelievable. It makes no sense to me that you can debate the semantics of how he's arched his body, but the reality is the purpose of that rule is that you're not supposed to be swinging your stick in the air at face level. That's clearly a face level baseball swing, higher than a baseball swing, in the air. And it was clear. I mean, to me, it was absolutely clear. Before they even started talking about it on the broadcast, I was like, oh, that looked high to me.
I said the same thing.
And he's coming in high, knocking the puck down. I mean, that's the spirit of the rule. And it's, hey, you can disagree with the rule. I actually think that it might be a bad rule to have the high sticking, automatic whistle rule. I think it's kind of silly. But if you have a rule, you got to call the rule. And so it just seemed crazy to me. I mean, ultimately, that doesn't end up mattering. But, in the scheme of things. But it's just frustrating. Because it felt like the officiating was slanted and not even like in a way to favor the Vegas Golden Knights, because I don't think that's true, but I think it felt slanted against giving the Panthers opportunity, or the benefit of the doubt on a lot of this stuff. And so I hope that, these officials, they have coaches, they have people that, for the NHL, give them feedback. I hope there's some feedback that maybe goes the Panthers' way in the following game. Because it seemed wrong, and that Mark Stone thing, it just seemed wrong. And I don't understand how quickly they came back with that. Like, they didn't even seem to take a minute to look at it. So that was kind of crazy to me. But yeah, definitely a high stick. Definitely should have been called back, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it ultimately, unfortunately, results in not only the game breaking open, but them going on the power play there. So at that point, you just knew that it wasn't the Florida Panthers night in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. But in segment number 2, we are going to discuss what was being said, what players we would like to have a different type of Game 2, and how we would want the Florida Panthers to adjust going into Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final. We're going to discuss this next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Segment number 3 here on this Sunday, June 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers lose Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final by a final score of 5-2 in the Sin City. I got Josh Leucht, the former host of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, here on the show. And we have a few quotes from post-game. And of course, we can take as much context as we want here, but a few quotes that Paul Maurice said was, everybody just effing breathe. That is a quote from Paul Maurice directly post-game from Vegas. And honestly, after experiencing Game 1 of the first round series, and we as Florida Panther fans are used to the Florida Panthers not winning Game 1s of series as well. And I know there was that 26-year drought and everything for the Florida Panthers too. But listen, we spoke about Vegas winning Game 1 of 2018 as well. Not everything carries over from one game to the other in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Also, Josh, The Paul Maurice also spoke this about the high stick review. He said, "I think they were just excited about getting us into the penalty box one more time." So it's continuous, the comical stuff that comes out of Paul Maurice's mouth, whether we like it or not. But it's just great. Even in losses, it's just great for what we hear from the head coach. So, what are your thoughts on what was said post game by Coach Maurice?
Yeah, it's message sending, right? Maurice is sending a message to the NHL that he's unhappy with the officiating. I'm surprised he didn't, say something about the referees had to get out of there to get to a bar mitzvah or something along those lines. Maurice it's gamesmanship. You say that in the media, it definitely gets back to the referees. Then they're thinking about it in the next game. You're trying to create some of that. But at the end of the day, I think he knows just as well as we all know that that was a high stick and should have been looked at a little bit tighter. And, I think the NHL war room in general hates calling goals back, and especially one that looks cool for their next commercial for the Stanley Cup. So that's what's going to happen. And, you just have to you can't win them all. So you move on and you try to move on with it. But I do think that Maurice has a good feel on how the team's morale has been. Have you been watching the Quest for the Cup on ESPN Plus?
I have watched the first three. I have not
Okay.
watched the recent one.
The recent one has a ton of Panther content. And the one thing that I love about those episodes is you can see Maurice is having fun with the team in the locker room. They're joking around. They're having a good time. Now, I know it's easy to say, well, yeah, you always have a good time when you win. But I don't think, let me put it this way, Panther fans. I don't think that the Florida Panthers were sitting in the locker room with their head buried in the towel
Mm-mm.
crying after the game tonight. I think they said, all right, boys, you lose them, you can't win them all, and they're going to come back and they're already plotting on which hole they're going to stick that puck in on Monday night after the game. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think that they're going to rally, and I think we're going to see a team with some fire on Monday night coming out, trying to get that. If you split these first two games, it's a whole new ball game. It becomes a best of 5 series.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just the experience factor that comes with Paul Maurice, and just knowing that he's been there, done that with in this league when it comes to that. One thing of note is that Anton Lundell did get his first point since the Toronto series. That point came on that overtime winner by Sam Reinhart back in the Toronto series. So it happened on that stall goal where William Karlsson breaks his stick, and then he puts him on ice skates, literally, to make that move to get Eric Stahl to break free before that wraparound goal. But a few players that I'd like to see play better. Anthony Duclair had a goal, but there's a few times where I thought that I was just thinking, I was like, Duke, you got to be better. Of course, we spoke about the White Cloud goal. And he made a great effort on that back check that not only was it deflected off of his stick, but Bob made an incredible save on Barbashev there. And that was right before the goal that was scored by White Cloud there. Excuse me. The Shea Theodore goal was the one that Duclair was struggling with his east-west movement, but the breakup on the opportunity to stop the rush, just you want to see better out of him there. But I also thought Nick Cousins was very active outside of that goal that Aiden Hill stopped. I thought he was also getting beat up big time tonight, even outside of that play where he was saying, "Are you effing blind, ref?" There was one where he was taken down by I think it was Pietrangelo near the offensive blue line. I believe it was, but Carrier, excuse me, it was Carrier that took him down there. But I thought Nick Cousins was also very active as well. Anton Lundell gets 4 shots on goal in the game as well. And but who would you like to see have a better game 2 for the Panthers?
Yeah, I think the Vegas Golden Knights did a good job of shutting down that Kachuk line, which means that the Barkov line just needs to step up. And, I think Barkov was pretty quiet. You didn't really see a whole lot out of him. And I think that's where the difference is when the Panthers are able to run all, their top three nines, their top three lines, their top nine guys, when they're able to run them in a consistent way and bring pressure, that's when they're successful. And honestly, in game one, the Barkov line was very, very quiet. I know Duclair scored a goal, but other than that, as far as their, and I'm not talking about that goal, but I'm saying like as far as their movement, as far as their shots on goal, their chances, I thought they were pretty quiet tonight. That's got to change. Hopefully we maybe see Luosterainen come back, and that'll spark the Reinhart line a little bit. That would be great. But yeah, those are the guys that we need to see more out of. And for all the talk in the pregame stuff in the last 10 days as we've waited for this series about Vegas's fourth line being better than the Panthers' fourth line, look, it's Eric Stahl who gets that first goal of the series. I know he's on the PK at the time, but that's not the point. The point is, I think we match up player for player with a lot of these guys, but the best guys have to be the best guys. And, Barkov, we need to see him do something. We need to see Verhaeghe come back after I don't think Verhaeghe had a point in the Carolina series, did he?
He had a goal in game 1
Okay.
against
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
So
He had a goal in game 1 of that series. But yeah, you were talking about crashing the net earlier. I like to see him more on like the give and go opportunities as well, where you can at least get a centering feed as well, and just try a redirection, because we didn't really see any of those redirect opportunities for the Florida Panthers there, while the Vegas Golden Knights were getting their fair share of redirect opportunities. There was even one on a double deflection that missed the net that the Panthers were lucky that it didn't get to there as well. So we like to see that cleaned up as well for the Panthers as well on that end. So it's one game. As far as panic meter, it's not high for me at all for this Panthers team. I mean, the series doesn't really start until someone loses at home, right? So
exactly.
And to win this, you got to at least get one in Vegas. And you know what? You have an opportunity on Monday night to do it, and before you come back home to FLA Live Arena.
Yeah, I agree. No panic in this game. It's just annoying more than anything else, but no panic, and I look forward to the Monday night game.
Yeah, so of course the Panthers will have a day off, and then we're not going to see many one-day gaps in this series. So thankfully, after Sunday, the Panthers will. The best thing that the Florida Panthers can do is have this day gap, and then they're right back in action on Monday night, 8 p.m. on TNT in the States. So, Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, a live edition of the show, and where the Florida Panthers unfortunately lose 5-2 against the Vegas Golden Knights, but still an opportunity to make something out of this series before they come back home. So tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yeah, you can follow me at Josh Loves Hockey on Twitter.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you so much, and hope to see you next time, my friend.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every day, make sure you come back for Monday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where Kevin Rodingen from the FLA Catnip podcast will be coming on the show to preview Game 2 between the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. So I'm Armando Velez with Josh Leucht, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.